Woohoo! And we're live once again on another Tuesday. Today is a special show, solo show that I'm doing. And the topic is increase your LinkedIn presence with podcasts. And the reason why I chose this topic today is I have recently launched a podcast, which is just a repurposing of my LinkedIn Lives. But it has been so valuable to get these episodes from the past back out into circulation again. And as I've been working through with all my guests, I've been learning things, but I've also been just more aware of how we should be marketing our guest appearances on podcasts. So I thought I would just kind of give you my top 7 tips for marketing your podcast appearances. And then let's take some comments, some questions. And if you have suggestions of things that you've done in the past to promote your podcast appearances, this is a good thing. So I'm just going to go ahead and get stuck right in. So the first thing that I wanted to tell you about is that use any podcast promos that the host gives you. Because what I've found is I have been on several podcasts now, I think maybe about 8 or 9 different podcasts. And so many of my podcast hosts went to the trouble of making clips or posts or audiograms and all sorts of different things. And I'll talk about what those all are in a second. And take that content, use that content, put it out on social media, put it out on LinkedIn, especially put it out on LinkedIn, but put it out on your other social channels as well. So that's my first tip. If you get any assets from your host, be sure to use those. My next tip is make your own promos. So if you have a situation where maybe your podcast host just is busy and they can't do it, or they got a million other things they're doing. And I have to tell you, running a podcast is a lot of work. So if the podcast host doesn't send you clips, do not fear, you can do it yourself. So what are some ideas of what you could do for promo pieces? Well, if you could do a clip, you could do a screenshot. If it's an audio podcast, of course, you can't do a screenshot. And actually, let me just backtrack for a second. When we're talking about podcasts, I'm talking about audio podcasts. I'm talking about podcasts that you go to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio. That's traditionally a podcast. So it's something that like you get on your phone, you download, you listen to, and you could hear it when you're out and about walking the dog or cleaning the house or whatever you're doing. Now, a video podcast, these are starting to get really big, and video podcasts are where maybe the person meets with you on StreamYard and they do the video and the audio, or maybe they meet with you on Zoom. And we're starting to see video podcasts come up on YouTube, and even I think Spotify is now doing them. So there's lots of places that you might have video podcasts. But for this episode, I'm talking primarily about audio podcasts. So when we're talking about how to make your own assets, you could do things like just a picture of you, maybe a picture of the host. If they have any kind of cover art for their podcast, you could use that. And you could also just do a text only post. And I was actually doing some research for this show last night, and I found a text only post where somebody did, I'm thinking it was Virginia Franco, and she did a whole blurb about the podcast, but almost like storytelling, talking about a story she was talking about in the podcast. And then as sort of that was a hook. And then at the end of the text post, there was like, if you want to listen to the interview, click here. And I thought that was brilliant. And this literally had tons and tons of likes and comments. So it doesn't even have to be a visual. It could just be a text post. So those are some of the promos that you could make yourself. Now, when you're making your own promo, the one I highly recommend, because I'm a video nut and I love doing all things video, I highly recommend an audiogram. And if you don't know what an audiogram is, it is usually a picture. So it's an MP4 file, but it's going to be a picture. And then usually it's going to be waveforms that you see go up and down. So the idea of the waveforms is as you're talking, as the audio is coming through, the waveforms are kind of giving the cue as somebody scrolling through the newsfeed that something's happening here. Something's going on in this video, and it's not just a picture. So it kind of like alerts people. Now, what I suggest is some of the programs out there for making audiograms also allow you to have the captions along the bottom. And that is a really great way because I'm really big on captioning. But again, this allows people to know what you're talking about. So just think of it. You've got the visual. So maybe it's a picture of you or a picture of you and the host, something like that. Then you have your waveforms going up and down. And then you have your subtitles. And so it all kind of compacts together into one little short audio clip. And I usually recommend 30 seconds, a minute. That's sort of a sweet spot of time of what you want to do for an audiogram. And I highly recommend a program called Headliner. And the reason why I like Headliner is you can either take the MP3 audio from the podcast and upload it, but a lot of times we don't have that. And the nice thing about Headliner is you can actually type in the name of the podcast. So say you're on mine, you could type in LinkedIn Easy Peasy Podcast. And then it's going to pull up all those episodes. And then you would just scroll through and you would pick, that's the episode I was on. And then it allows you, it brings in the whole audio into Headliner. And then it allows you to kind of go through and pick the segment that you want and say, start here, end here. And that's the segment that I want. So I think that's incredibly brilliant. Then you can upload a photo. It does the captioning right within. It does the waveforms right within. And then hold your seats, guys. It is free. You can use the free app. And I believe the free app allows you to do 5 audio, like 5 MP4s, 5 videos per month. In addition, it allows you to do, I believe, 10 minutes of transcription for free. So you think about it, if you were on one podcast and you're only doing 1 minute of transcription, you'd have it for other things as well. So it's kind of a cool tool. I think I have a YouTube video kind of talking about actually when you make your profile video that walks you through Headliner, but it's really easy to use. It's a desktop tool and it's called Headliner. I think it's .app, but it just search for Headliner and you'll find it. So that's the one I highly recommend. Another thing I highly recommend is to use hashtags. And the reason why you want to use hashtags is, first of all, you want to use hashtags that are relevant to your brand, relevant to what you were talking about in the podcast, because hashtags are just a way to be seen on LinkedIn for people to find you. But more importantly, always use the hashtag podcasts. And the reason why you want to do that is 55,000 plus people follow that hashtag. So think about it. People who are maybe other podcast hosts are looking for guests. If you were to take your appearance and then you put that hashtag of podcast, then other people will see that you have done that podcast. You have done a podcast promo piece, whether it's an audiogram or a text post or a graphic post or whatever. And if it has a link to your podcast, this is a really good way for people to learn that you're good at podcasting, you're a great guest, somebody should invite you on. So that's just a really good tip, is to use the podcast hashtag. 55,000 people. That's a lot of people. So that's really, really good. And then another one that I recommend is using Spotify. Use Spotify to create a playlist of all your guest appearances. And it doesn't matter if you've been on 1 podcast, 2 podcasts, 10 podcasts, 50 podcasts. It doesn't matter. What you can do is you can go into Spotify. It doesn't cost anything. And I do have an article on how to do all this. So I'll link to that in the show notes. And what you can do is you can set up a Spotify guest list of all your podcast appearances. And then that way people can see the depth of your industry knowledge. What do you talk about? It's great for other podcast hosts. They can go through, get some ideas. It's also good for maybe prospective employers. If you're job searching, if you're searching, job searching. If you're looking for a job, this could give some people some ideas of your ability to talk and your industry expertise, all those kind of things. If you are a business and you're trying to promote yourself as a business, again, this gives you a lot of credibility of who you are, what you know, what you do, and it just allows people to kind of get to know, like, and trust you. So, highly recommend this, having these Spotify playlists. And as a matter of fact, if you go to my profile, not now, because I want you to stay out in the live, but if you were on my profile right now, I took my clickable link that's at the top of the profile that you can set, and I actually have a link to my Spotify playlist so that if somebody wanted to see, oh, what podcast has she been on? You could click on that and it opens it up, and then you can see all the podcasts, and they actually play. So that's an awesome thing. And if you have a website, you can take that Spotify playlist and embed it on your website. So again, another thing to give you credibility. I know that's off LinkedIn if it's on your website, but it's just a really good thing to do. And then the next thing is put it in your experience section. And I think I learned about this from Kevin D. Turner. He has, I think, a public speaker as one of his experiences on his website. I, on mine, actually changed it and make it podcast appearances. But you could think about it. If you're doing LinkedIn Lives and podcasts, maybe you want to have a whole experience in your LinkedIn profile. That's all of these events. And then you can put links to your past shows, links. You can put that Spotify guest playlist in your experience section. So again, it's another way to have some credibility of that you're available to do this, because if you're a guest on a podcast, or a LinkedIn Live even, you are showing that you're able to think on your feet. You're able to take a question and just give a great answer, talk about different things. It's thought leadership pieces, and that's what we want to do for LinkedIn, is look good with thought leadership pieces. And then the last thing that I highly recommend is put your podcast inside an article, a LinkedIn article, or a newsletter. So there's several ways you can do it. One, you can actually embed the podcast episode. And what I mean by that is whenever your podcast is somewhere in LinkedIn, there's two kinds of podcasts platforms that you can embed right inside the article. The first one is SoundCloud, and the second one is Spotify. Now, sometimes with Spotify, it's a little sketchy. Sometimes it's the full episode, and sometimes it's just a preview episode. I have yet to figure out how this is. I have a help ticket in for Spotify. I've had it in for about a week now saying, hey, can you help me with this? Because I'm not understanding why sometimes you only get a preview and other times it's the entire 30 minutes or hour or however long you are on the podcast. But it's really cool because you can embed it just like you would embed a YouTube video or a Vimeo video. You can embed a podcast. And what it does is it actually has that little play bar, and you click and you can listen to it. And it's just that little skinny play bar that they could listen to. So that's one way that you could put it inside a LinkedIn article or newsletter. Another thing you could do is if you have access to the MP3, you could upload it to, I love using Otter, so I upload my stuff to Otter and then I can get a transcript. If you don't have Otter, you could use something like rev.com. Temi is one I highly recommend. And you can take that MP3, upload it, and then you can get a transcript. And then you could turn that into a whole article of what you talked about, which is kind of a cool thing. And then if you embed the podcast, I think that's just kind of like a double thing. People can read or people can listen, either way. And I believe that if you can't get access to the actual MP3, if the host doesn't give it to you, then what you might have to do is, I think, not 100% sure, but I think if you use rev.com, you can paste in a link. So if they said, oh, yes, your podcast was on Apple and here's the link, I think you can paste that into rev.com and then it will actually create the transcript for you. Of course, it's not going to be free. You do have to pay for Rev. But anyways, that's something to check out too as well. So that's kind of it. A couple of extra things that I would also suggest is if you ever make any LinkedIn posts or a LinkedIn article or anything talking about a podcast experience, be sure to tag your podcast host. That way they'll get recognition and they'll know that you're out there promoting their stuff. And I think it's a win-win because when you promote a podcast that you've been on, not only are people exposed to you, but people are exposed to maybe a podcast that they were never even aware of even existed before. So maybe they're going to get tuned into it. And I think it was Michelle J. Raymond where I was on Connect the Dots with Vicki O'Neill. Fabulous podcast. Highly recommend it. And she, again, was a wonderful host. She gave me a clip and I used the clip and I used it to promote it. And so she promoted it on YouTube as well. So that's really, really great. So shout out to Vicki O'Neill for that because that was awesome. And she's a video queen. So I would expect no less that she would create a great video. And when Vicki created that for me, I when I posted it, I tagged her, I thanked her. I also did a review of her podcast and made sure that, that was up for everyone to see as well. So these are just kind of the things. Oh, this was my story. I'm sorry. I forgot what I was talking about. So when I think through Vicki O'Neill, when I was on her podcast and I was promoting my guest appearance, Michelle J. Raymond learned about Vicki O'Neill. And then the next thing you know, they got to know each other. They connected and Michelle J. Raymond was on her podcast as well. So it kind of what goes around comes around and it's really nice. And Michelle J. Raymond, let me give her a shout out in that she taught me about podcasting. She was the one that, taught me how to take LinkedIn lives and how to use Descript and how to make podcasts. So I want to give her a shout out because she helped the video queen with doing all this sort of thing. So that was really fun. And I now doing the same thing where we repurpose our LinkedIn lives. We've turned them into podcasts. So again, this is what you can do. And Michelle J. Raymond is another one. Go to her business page. I believe she either has a showcase. I should have known this for sure, but I've forgotten. She either has a showcase or she has a business page just for her podcast appearances, which is another brilliant idea. So basically, there are lots of ways that you can get your podcast out there on LinkedIn. Don't forget to use hashtags. They're so relevant. Don't forget to continue to network and support the podcast appearances of other people that you have been on their podcast. And that's another way. Interact. If there's a podcast you want to be on, start interacting with the podcast host. Boy, that's a hard one to say. So that you get on their radar screen, get to know them and give them feedback. If you like their podcast, leave them a review. It's the kindest thing that you can do is leave somebody a podcast review. It means so much to people. And what happens is every time we leave reviews, it just kind of gives them like bonus points on Apple. That's where I like reviews is on Apple. And when you get reviews on Apple then it just kind of helps boost you up and maybe you're going to be seen by more and more new people. And the more that new people find that podcast, the more they're going to find the episode you were on as well. So I think that's kind of cool. So with that being said, I'm pretty much done with my 7 top tips for being on podcasts. So I'm going to hop over and let's just take some comments, questions, and oh, look at this. The queen. Whoop, whoop, whoop. The queen right here. Hi, Gillian. Long time no see. You need to talk with this lady. She has amazing stuff. Marketing podcast. That's her biz. So connect with her. She's amazing. She's amazing. Thank you for being here. The live is restarting again. Oh, what is this? This happened last week. Okay. Jeff Young, this has gotten worse. I don't know what the deal is. It started last week. Greetings from metropolitan Detroit. I love when we just get across the country and everybody across the world. I'm hoping my folks across the pond today are tuning in too, but it's great to know Detroit is in the house. Okay, it has been bad lately. Okay, what we're still wondering about. I hope we're not like, I'm probably talking to myself here. Okay, started a second time. I am across the pond. Woo-hoo-hoo. Greetings from Belgium. So it's wonderful. We've got Belgium in the house. Thank goodness I wasn't doing this live yesterday because nobody would be watching with all of the stuff going on with the Queen, but it's amazing. Hello from Florida. Yay. We got the East Coast. So we've got the North and the South coming in. So that is amazing. We've got Scotland in the house today. Scotland in the house. I don't know. Everybody's having their LinkedIn live restarting. I have no idea what's going on. Headliner. Yes. Another yay for Headliner. Headliner is great for creating audiograms and video clips. I love it. It's so true. It is so easy to use. There's a couple other ones out there. You could get Descript. You can use Descript. I don't know how far you can go on the free program. I'm on a paid program, but I'm using it for audiograms as well. So that's another one. But if you're just a guest, you probably don't want to have a whole thing. So Headliner is an absolute wonderful one to start with. Hey, hello there hello there, everyone. We've got the king of live streams here, Gabe. Yay. Juana, no clue. Just keep watching. It gets better. Gabe, hi there. Hi there. I heard, oh, he's taking the day off today. I give up watching the replay. Oh, it's so sad. I don't know. I can hear the audio, but I can't see the video. First it was frozen. Now the image is gone. Oh my goodness. Checking out Headliner on the desktop. That's good. That's good. If you get good, she's offering help. She's offering help. So Juana's offering help. If anybody needs any help with Headliner, reach out to her. She is amazing at it. This repeats. Okay, everybody's off to the replay because it's just not working today. So we'll just keep going. Thanks for coming. Better late than never. I always say better late than never. So frustrating with the LinkedIn lives, and I know it's not me because I go to YouTube and these things are perfectly wonderful. So I'm just going to keep going on through. Laura's seeing it and she's saying it's terrific tips. So I guess maybe there's like some parts of the country it's coming through and some parts of the country it's not coming through. And it always feels that like LinkedIn, when they're doing weird updates, I know people's pictures are going missing and all sorts of weird things are happening for people. Featured sections are going goofy. So I think maybe LinkedIn's about to roll out something. Wouldn't it be nice if it was auto captions? We would all love that. That would be absolutely amazing. I love that Scotland's in the house today. So that's absolutely awesome. So LinkedIn podcasts. Podcasts are an amazing way to be seen. And it's just one way for you to establish your credibility. And I'm going to just give you a couple of extra tips of preparing for podcasts. First of all, I will put a link to this. John Asperian, who I always have to mention on my show, even when I don't have a guest, and he usually comes up in the conversation. But I often love to point everyone to John Asperian, who has an amazing article. It's a blog post on his website where he talks about how to be a guest. Because I had somebody a couple of weeks ago that said, okay, I'd love to promote my podcast appearances, but how do I get on a podcast in the first place? So whether you've only been on a few and you want to be on more, or you've never been on a podcast at all, John's article kind of walks you through the steps of what you want to do. And I'm going to tell you, I speak from experience because when I first read that article, I had never been on a podcast at all. And this was like 2 years ago. So I had gone my whole adult life, my whole life, never being on a podcast. And then I went through John's article, and through that, I began to see, oh, what exactly do you need to do? So you want to make sure you have a picture ready. You want to have a bio ready because you want to have all these things ready for your host and make their job easy. Think about some things that you're an expert on that you would like to talk about on a podcast, because then that way, if you wanted to approach somebody and say, hey, hey, Jules White, I want to be on the Human Conversation. By the way, one of the podcasts I've been on, I could approach her and say, Jules, I can talk about LinkedIn Live. I can talk about LinkedIn video. I can talk about LinkedIn podcasting, whatever. I can talk about all these different things. These are my areas of expertise. And always, get to know the podcast before you pitch because you may not be appropriate. It might not be a good fit for you. So you want to make sure you've listened to a couple of episodes, you feel comfortable. Yes, my expertise would be appropriate here. Maybe you got to kind of repackage that expertise. So say for instance, I wanted to be on a podcast talking for people that are looking for jobs. I might want to hone my video pitch topics to be about how can video help job seekers, be seen by recruiters, or how can doing video on LinkedIn help you be more comfortable for when you do interviews on Zoom, something along the lines, or my top 10 tips for doing, LinkedIn video for job seekers, whatever. I'd want to hone it towards the podcast. So don't just say, "Hi, I'd like to be on your podcast." Think about what value do you bring to the table? Make sure you have a photo, make sure that you have a bio, and then maybe do 2 or 3 topics of this is what I would be happy to talk about based on their podcast, or say I'm open to anything else that you might prefer to talk about. So those are some of the things that I would suggest. And it's really going to do well for you if you target a particular podcast to also leave a review before you even ask to be on their podcast. That way, you're kind of leading with value by, I'm listening to your podcast. I like your podcast. I've left you a nice review. Then think about approaching that person and seeing if you could be on your podcast. So that would be some of the recommendations that I would have. So, with that said, if I kind of come back, this was our topic today. I was talking about increasing your LinkedIn presence with podcasts. It's amazing. Highly, highly recommend articles and newsletters because, as you know, I'm also the Google goddess. And the Google goddess says that when you use LinkedIn articles and LinkedIn newsletters, recognize that those are long form content and long term content, and they get indexed by Google search engines, which means that if people are looking for a particular topic and they're sitting there Googling it and it shows an article on LinkedIn, just think a year from now, 6 months from now, people might find that podcast and find you talking about that podcast. So that is another way to drive traffic to who is this person? What are they talking about? What are the things that they know about? So I highly recommend always being Google searchable because it's just one way people can get to know, like, and trust you is through the Google search engines. So that's it for me today, signing off. I don't see any more comments because everybody's kind of upset about everything going on. Oh, we got one last comment. No screen, but I figured this is about podcasts, so you must have turned off the video. I don't know what happened. So anyways, we'll see what happens today. Maybe the replay, it'll all sort itself out. But I appreciate everybody's patience today. And maybe we got to do more podcasts because LinkedIn is just mucking with these LinkedIn Lives. So maybe it's good that we're doing podcasts. Who knows? We stretch, we grow, and we learn everything. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks for being here today. And I'll go ahead and I'm going to sign off here. And I will see you all next time. Thanks. Bye.